Hello everybody. I want to say up top that this is a little bit different than what I normally do, so if you're one of my normal viewers, this is not a song cover, so this might not be for you. This is intended more for other music teachers. Feel free to stick around and check it out if you want though. But for the music teachers that are here, about a year ago I did a video titled In Defense of the Recorder, because as a music teacher I get so tired of people bashing the recorder and saying things like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad I learned the recorder instead of how to do my taxes in school," as if you would learn to do your taxes in third grade music or play recorder in high school accounting classes. So I got really fed up with that stuff. I made a video about why we use the recorder in music class, what things it helps us achieve, both musically and not musically, and it was pretty well received. So I knew at the time that I wanted to make a video about ukuleles eventually, and we've gotten to eventually, so it's roughly a year later. So today I'm going to be talking about, in my opinion and in my experience, why I think ukuleles are becoming more popular in schools. Now I will say, for my recorder video, recorders have been used in music classrooms for decades now. There's documentation on it, there's papers on it, there's research that you can do. That was very helpful for me in making that video. Ukuleles are a more modern phenomenon, and if there is research, I don't know about it. I didn't look for it. So this is just coming from my experience as a musician and as a teacher. So if you have more to add that I don't say in this video, please put it in the comments so that other people that watch this can check down and see what other people have to say. Because I by no means think that I know everything or know all situations. So this is just coming from my experience, my opinions, my reasonings for the choices that I make. So we are talking about why ukuleles are becoming so popular in music classrooms these days. And I'm really going to focus in this video on why ukuleles over guitars. And I don't think that's always the question, but I feel like, again, in my experience, most of the time, if people hear that I teach ukulele in class, they say something along the lines of, "Why not just teach them guitar?" Or, "Are those just little guitars?" Or, "I would rather learn the guitar," right? Everybody, when they hear ukulele, they think of it as an inferior version of a guitar. So I want to talk focusing on that relationship between ukulele and guitar and why I believe for my kids, ukulele is a better option than guitar. Now, I teach ukulele starting at the 4th grade level. So if you start with higher level kids, not all of this stuff is going to apply to you, but I think some of it will. So I'm going to stop preambling and we're going to get to it. So my first point, I've got a little bulleted list over here on my computer screen for myself, is that most guitars are too big for little hands and little bodies. So I've got a couple different kinds of guitars here. This is a pretty average sized electric guitar. This is a Squier Stratocaster. It's a nice common starter guitar. It's pretty long, right? You can imagine a 4th grader is going to have trouble holding this, right? The other problem with electric guitars is that they're pretty quiet. Now, you might like having a bunch of quiet instruments in your room, but the kids are not going to like that. They're going to want to be able to hear themselves, and if you've got 30 kids playing on these, no one's going to be able to hear anything, which means they're going to try to play harder, which means they're going to break more strings, which means they're going to destroy more picks. Electric guitars are not a great option unless you want to get amps and headphones for everybody, which is a whole extra hassle. But the biggest problem is that they're just too big. Right? Now, if you want to avoid the amp issue, you could go with acoustic guitars. Now, this one doesn't have any strings on it, but this is a pretty standard size acoustic guitar. This is even bigger. This has a huge body. This is not going to sit well on a child's lap. And acoustic guitars, I've got another one on here, or another one with strings here. Just a less conventional shape. The strings are thicker and are much harder to push down. So you can hear it better. You don't need amps. But you have to push much, much harder on the strings, which I can do because I've been playing guitar for almost 20 years. But a new kid learning how to play on something like this, it's going to be very, very difficult. And for my students that do choose to go into guitar, I make them start on acoustic before they can do electric, because I did the opposite. I started on electric, and after playing electric for a few years, I was like, oh, I'll buy an acoustic guitar so that I'll have an acoustic guitar. And then I realized when I paid for that guitar and it came in that I couldn't play it because I didn't have the strength built up. So that made me very, very frustrated. So I don't want anyone to go through that process of you think you know how to play this instrument, but not really. So I start them on acoustic guitar, so I only start that with older kids. I don't start it with my younger kids. Now we have one more option here. This is a classical guitar. So these strings are nylon, which are the same material that ukulele strings are made out of. So they're much easier to push down. But this guitar is even bigger than the acoustic guitar. The neck is even wider, which means it's going to be even harder for little hands to fit those stretches, to push all those down at once. So there are other types of guitars. They make what I would call a junior size guitar that's got a much smaller body and a much shorter neck. And guess what? It pretty much looks like a ukulele. But it is technically a guitar. It has 6 strings. But in my experience, and I haven't used a lot of these, they don't stay in tune very well unless you tune them up a 4th or a 5th, and then they work a little bit better. But then you're not even playing in the normal key of a guitar, which might be fine for some people. It depends on your situation, if you're playing with the same instruments or if you're playing with different instruments and then you need to transpose and things like that. But even a smaller instrument that will fit their body, if it's a guitar, it's going to have 6 strings, whereas ukuleles only have 4 strings. Excuse me. So that's going to make stretching to fit the different chords easier when you maximum have 4 strings to push down instead of 6. Even if the guitar is smaller and nearly the size of a ukulele, playing on 6 strings is more difficult than playing on 4 strings. So I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think it's a good option to choose an instrument that's not a ukulele, not really guitar, somewhere in the middle that you have to tune out of key. That's still going to be more difficult than just playing a ukulele. So I would rather have my students play a ukulele because I still think it's going to be simpler, it's going to be more straightforward, and it's not this weird hybrid instrument. There's this concept that I used to know someone who was left-handed, but she learned how to play guitar right-handed. And I asked her why, and she said, because if I go somewhere and there's a guitar there, I want to be able to play it. And that same concept, I think, comes through here. If somebody learns guitar on an instrument that's not really a guitar, and they tell their friends, oh, I know how to play guitar, I can play guitar, I can play guitar. And then they're over, someplace, and someone's like, oh, you can play guitar, right? And they bring out a guitar. They're not going to be able to play it. And then they're going to be embarrassed, and then they're going to be upset, and then they're not going to want to play music anymore. Whereas if they say, I can play the ukulele, and someone brings out a ukulele, they're going to be able to play that ukulele. So you can tell me that that's a weird emotional reasoning for me, but that stays true to me. And I don't think it's nothing. So I was talking about the benefits of 4 strings, longer finger stretches. Certain chords require pushing down more than 1 string. So like the F chord on a guitar requires pushing 2 strings down with 1 finger, which is very difficult for beginners. Whereas something like a G chord on a ukulele can be played a couple different ways, but one way can be to use 1 finger to push down 3 strings, and it's easier for them because the strings are closer together. So they don't have to do weird things with their hand to play multiple strings with 1 finger. Bar chords are a lot easier. If I wanted to play a bar chord On this guy, I need this index finger stretching across this big wide neck, which even me with full-size hands can be difficult sometimes. Whereas if I'm going to play a bar chord on this ukulele, it's like not even half my finger. So someone with a much smaller hand is still going to be able to do that. And this is even a larger size ukulele. They would use something like this, so it's going to be even easier. So less strings just makes things simpler for smaller hands. Also, if you use a guitar, it's got more strings, which means you're going to have more broken strings, which means you're going to be spending more money on strings if you've got more strings per instrument. Now, I skipped over a point, so I got to move backwards here. We were talking about the size of the instrument. That's not only a factor for their bodies, but it's also a factor for where are you going to put 30 of these in the classroom. These take up a lot more space on your wall or on a cart or on a stand than these do. In my classroom, I've got 30 ukuleles hanging up on a pegboard that take up less space overall than 5 guitars sitting in a stand on the floor. So it's not just that it's too big for their bodies. In most cases, we don't have that kind of rooms in our classroom to put 30 guitars. If you do, good for you, because I sure don't. So it's a lot easier to fit in the classroom. My kids in 4th grade get their own ukuleles. I don't pass them out. I don't bring the cart around. They get up, they get them themselves, they get ready, we play, they put them away at the end of class. My high schoolers that use these guitars still don't put them away properly because they're packed together so tightly, they'll knock them off, they won't sit on the stand quite right, and they'll fall sideways, and it's a bad stand, but it was the best stand that I could use based on the space that I had, and so we've had guitars get broken because they fell off because I don't have enough room to properly store the guitars that I want to have. Okay, I already talked about strings. I'm sorry, I'm kind of jumping around here. We talked about nylon versus steel. So ukuleles use nylon strings. Those are easier to press, easier to hold, easier to play multiple strings. I've talked about all this. Easier to play bar chords. Let's talk about tuning. A big thing that I see on like Facebook pages for music teachers is people asking, how do I keep my ukuleles in tune? My ukuleles will not stay in tune. Most of the time it's the strings. Nylon strings are very stretchy. And they are just going to take a long time to get stretched out all the way. So when I, put new strings on a ukulele, I play it a lot. I play it hard. I go through and I bend the strings on both sides. I don't think you can see my other finger there. But I bend it on both sides all the way up and down very slowly. I do that on all strings. I bend on the neck, right? I'll do as much as I can. And I'll do that for a couple days in a row. And then it's mostly ready. So if you are getting new ukuleles or restringing your ukuleles, it's going to take a while for them to stay in tune when you're breaking them in. But once they're in tune, once they're stretched out, they stay in tune way better than steel strings on a guitar would. They do not react nearly as much to changes in temperature. And because students are using, if you teach them properly, their fingers and not picks, they're not pushing very hard on the strings, so they don't get stretched out much that way like steel strings on a guitar would. So I got, like I said, 30 ukuleles hanging up in my classroom. I tune them every morning, and after stuff gets going, after they're all broken in, after the kids all learn the proper way to strum them, it takes me less than 5 minutes to just check that they're all tuned, right? I don't tune them all perfectly. I tune them close enough for 4th graders, but it won't take long to keep them there. It just takes a long time to get them there. So if that's something that you've struggled with in the past, it's probably just the strings. Long term, though, they're better. Okay, my last point, I don't want to spend too much time on this because I don't know if you can still get these, but at a point, and they're not on this ukulele, but you can buy colored strings, colored ukulele strings, and half of my ukuleles at my school have colored strings because when you're teaching students things on the ukulele, it's very confusing which string is the first string and which string is the fourth string, right? So if I'm teaching C chord and I say put your ring finger on the 3rd fret of the first string, half the class is going to put their finger up here because they think that's the first string, right? Maybe that is the first string. Maybe I said it wrong. Maybe that's the 4th string, right? It depends on how you think about it. It depends on what materials you use to pull content from, right? To pull songs from. I would actually call this the 4th string, but a lot of people would call it the 1st string. And it's confusing. And if you say a number, then they have to count, okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's the 3rd string. And then if they did it backwards, then they're like, oh, 1, 2, 3. Whereas if you can just say, put your ring finger on the 3rd fret of the blue string, that string's not blue, I forget what color it is, they know to just put it on the blue string, right? That also helps me when I write chord diagrams up on the marker board, because I can make the lines of the diagram the same color as the strings. So it's a lot easier for them if they are ahead of the class and everyone else is still working on their A minor chord and they've got it, I'll be like, okay, see if you can figure out the A major chord, right? And because it's got the colors there, it's a lot easier for them to know, whereas opposed to when I'm teaching junior high and high school kids guitar chords, I can give them the chord diagram and they're lost for a while until they've done it a few times and then finally they get it. But it's much easier, especially for younger kids, when you can color code that stuff. So like I said, I have half of my ukuleles with the colored strings, and then they get a chance to upgrade during the year to the non-colored strings once they show me that they can play the chords without having to rely on the colors, without having to look directly at their fingers every time. And so it's not nearly as involved as like recorder karate, but there's that element of you do enough work, you get skilled enough, you get the orange ukulele, which doesn't have the colored strings, right? So everybody starts with blue ukuleles, which have colored strings. Those are the beginner ukuleles, but you can advance up to the orange ukulele, and then everybody knows you've got the orange. And at the concert, I say something like, the people that have got the orange ukuleles have memorized all the chords without, I'll say something like that. So there's like an element of pride there. They get the orange ukulele. They like that a lot. So I know you can buy colored strings on guitars, but I don't think, as far as I know, I don't think they make sets where like each string is a different color. You could like buy green strings or buy red strings and mix and match them. And again, like I said, I don't know if you can still do this on ukulele, because I know sometimes I've gone to buy more and they were out, but I look specifically for one brand of them because it's a brand that I like. So you might be able to get them in different brands. Maybe they'll come back into I wanted to say into print. That's not right. If they're discontinued, perhaps they'll be recontinued again. So yeah, let's move on. So I just mentioned that my class uses blue ukuleles and orange ukuleles. That's another big thing for little kids. They like things that have cool colors. And in my school, I have all of our instruments in, well, not all of our instruments, as many instruments as I can in school colors. Our school colors are blue and orange. So in my classes that use buckets for bucket drumming, we've got Lowe's and Home Depot buckets, blue and orange. In the classes that do recorders, we've got blue recorders and orange recorders. And in those two, they generally get to choose their color. And then when we get to the ukuleles, we've got blue ukuleles and orange ukuleles. And then, like I said, I've got that upgrade system in place. Just because that way, if they know that they need the colored strings, they don't have to look at all the ukuleles to find one with colored strings. They just know all the blue ones have colored strings, all the orange ones don't. But you can get, all the colors of the rainbow. I got this black one for myself. This is the same kind that I use in my classroom. This is Diamond Head, and this is the soprano size. And I had, I've got a concert size. That's electric. That's nice and fancy, and that costs, a lot more money than the other ones. But these cost around $30. And I just wanted one that I could be a little bit less careful with than my fancy one. And I liked them in the school. So I got one for myself in black. But we've got them in orange and blue. I've bought one for my sister in teal because she likes teal. She doesn't ever play it. but she likes the color of it. And you know, kids like things in different colors. I like things in different colors. My next point is picks. So I know this is another thing that is sometimes hotly debated on music teacher Facebook pages, but I like the rule that if it doesn't have a pick guard, it doesn't use a pick. So that's another thing that you have to worry about if you're teaching guitar. Do you use picks? Do you not use picks? How thick do you make the picks? Do you get different thicknesses for different people? Are you going to use the Dunlop picks that are color-coded so kids know what colors they want? You're going to lose a lot of picks. You're going to get picks dropped into the sound hole, which, by the way, if you use acoustic guitars like this with your class, get mutes for them. They make little rubber mutes that you can plug right in there. They're like $5 each. They don't actually make it that much quieter. They reduce the overtones. But what they do is keep things like picks or candy bar wrappers or crumpled up water bottles from going in the holes of the guitar. So separate pro tip there. But with ukuleles, there's no pick guard. So we do not use picks at my school. I'm not the kind of person that if I hear that another teacher does, I'm like, you are teaching them wrong. You are horrible, blah, blah, blah. It's just, I don't do it. We don't need it. I teach them how to do it. We use the fingernail, right? There are some kids that struggle and they're going to drag the fleshy part right above the fingernail across the strings instead of using the fingernail. And they will say, this hurts my finger. And then you can tell them, that's because you're doing it wrong. Use your fingernail. Long term, I have not had any problems with using fingers over picks. So that means I don't have to buy picks. I don't have to keep track of picks. I don't have to make sure I've got the right thicknesses of picks. I don't have kids throwing picks at each other during class. A lot less to deal with. Next up is the sizes. I already talked about this a little bit, but my classroom uses the soprano size. I do have a concert size also at my school. That is usually what I use in class. We have a little sound system that I can plug in if I want everybody to hear mine specifically. I don't usually do that, but sometimes it's nice to have that option. So I would recommend, if you are thinking about getting ukuleles for your classroom, I would recommend getting a concert size for you, the teacher. Your hands are probably bigger than theirs, and this is just a little bit easier to reach on. Even if you don't want the electric part, you can just get a nice acoustic concert size for you, and then it's very clear which one is your ukulele and not a student ukulele. If you have particularly small fingers and you don't feel like you need a concert size, just get a different color, right? So if mine are half blue and half orange, I might get one white one, and that's the teacher one, right? That's what I do with my stands. We've got blue stands and orange stands, and then the white stand is the teacher stand, and that's just understood. But they make larger sizes also. So you can get a tenor size, which is slightly bigger than this, and then a baritone size, which is almost the size of a small guitar. But I don't think most people are going to need anything more than a concert size. When I have students that are pretty advanced on the ukulele, I might have them play with another group, and then it's nice to be able to plug it in at the concert. So if third graders are playing recorders, but I've got a junior high kid that's really good at the ukulele, I can have them accompany that other class, and then they get to use the fancy ukulele at the concert. So it's good to have one nice one and then a bunch of smaller ones, but you've got different sizes. So, you know, if you are starting this later, maybe you're starting it in 5th grade or junior high, there's going to be a wide range of sizes of your kids. So maybe you get, 15 sopranos and 15 concerts and one tenor, right? And maybe the tenor one's the odd one out. But there's more variety. How do I want to say this? Obviously, there's a wide variety of guitars. But there's more variety of size while being pretty consistent on everything else about how it plays, about how it feels, about how it sounds. Whereas guitar, yeah, you could get ones that are bigger or smaller, but they're probably going to feel and sound and look very, very different. Whereas you can get different sizes of ukuleles that look similar, that sound similar, that feel similar. It's just that they're slightly different sizes. My next point is just $3 signs. So something like this, probably going to be maybe like $175, $200 for a starter electric guitar. The acoustic guitars that I buy for my classroom are Yamaha models, and I think they're about that same price range also, somewhere around $200. These, depending on the color, are like $25 to $35. So you can get a lot more of these per dollar than the guitars. I realize that's not everybody's main focus, but a lot of us don't have great budgets, and you can get, you know, I believe that this brand has held up pretty well. We've been using these for 4 or 5 years now, and I haven't had any that have, you know, are unusable now. There are some where, you know, we're getting some splitting here, and we've got nicks in the paint from people dropping them and whatnot, but all of them are still usable. But even if we did break one, or someone fell on one or stepped on one or something, they're a lot easier to replace monetary-wise than a guitar. And like I said, we've broken more guitars, even though we have much fewer of them, and it's older kids using those. We've broken 2 guitars in the same amount of time that we've broken 0 ukuleles. So a lot more bang for your buck there. My last main point here. I know this video is kind of long. If nothing else that I've said has made you sway away from the idea that, well, my kids want to learn guitar, or I want to teach my kids guitar, right? Or you make some good points, but it's still just not the guitar. If you're really hung up on the fact that it's not a guitar, it is. It's pretty common knowledge that a bass guitar is the first 4 strings of a 6-string guitar. E, A, D, G. Just no B and no high E. For some reason, it is not very commonly known, and I didn't even know this myself until last year. And I've been teaching and playing ukulele for years. But I didn't know this because, I don't know, it's just not as known. A ukulele is the last 4 strings of a guitar, just up a 4th. So if I take my classical guitar here, and I take a capo, and I put it on the 5th fret. This capo is not quite wide enough for this neck. And I play what on guitar is a D string. And then I take that to the ukulele, and I play the same thing. It's the same chord. The strings of a ukulele are the same as the strings of a guitar with a capo on the 5th fret. So, every chord that you learn on the ukulele can be applied to the guitar. And you don't have to put a capo on there. All you have to do is ignore the top 2 strings. Don't play those, don't strum those. That is a G chord on the ukulele. It's a D chord on the guitar. That's a C chord on the ukulele. It's a G chord on the guitar. This is an F on the ukulele. I've already lost track of the transposition. That's an A minor. This would be a barred D chord. So every chord that you learn on the ukulele, you can play on a guitar if you just understand that you don't play the top 2 strings. And then, if you're really, really gung-ho about, well, I want to play the guitar, then you can figure out how to modify those for the guitar. But someone that knows how to play ukulele, you could, if they get large enough, you can hand them a guitar and say, play your ukulele chords, just don't play the top 2 strings, and they will be able to do it. So as much as I hate it when the kids call ukuleles little guitars, That's what they are. If you're teaching your kids ukulele, you're teaching them guitar. You're just ignoring two of the strings because their hands are just too little. I missed a point here. When you're teaching chords on ukulele, there are several chords that are very, very similar to other chords. A minor versus A major, it's just adding one finger. A minor versus F, it's just adding one finger in a different spot. F versus D minor, you're just adding one finger. Other than E minor to E major on the guitar, there aren't really, I mean, I'm sure there are obscure chords that do, but in your main normal stable of chords, that doesn't happen. Every chord is totally different. Whereas with ukulele, you can easily practice going from A minor to F just by moving one finger. And so when they're struggling with stuff, you can ease up and take it back to something very simple like that. So I've now talked for over half an hour about ukuleles. I'm going to do some plugging here at the end, but that's pretty much the end if you want to bail out now. If you don't want to bail out now, I normally don't ask people to subscribe to me, but if you found this interesting, if you found this helpful, if you found this useful, I do videos here. Not always like this. Usually it's song covers. I do a video every week. Usually it's a song cover, but I do a lot of combining different instruments. So I'll play the guitar and the piano at the same time, or I'll switch between guitar, piano, ukulele, different things like that. I'm trying to expand what's possible to do with one person without having to rely on editing software and different gimmicks like that. I do a lot of equipment demos. So I've got demos up for electric drum sets, guitar pedals, voice pedals that add harmony or auto-tune or gender changing, different things like that. I've got videos about loopers, both microphone loopers and instrument loopers. And then I have some videos featuring plastic instruments, if you're interested in any of those. I've got one where I compare actual real brass instruments to a plastic brass instruments. So feel free, if any of that sounds interesting to you, to, everyone says hit that subscribe button. Is it really a button? It's just an area of the screen that you click. I guess that's what a button is, but I don't know. I don't think that phrase makes very much sense. But that's what I do here, so feel free to subscribe if you think those are interesting. Like I said at the top, if you have other reasons that you do ukuleles that I didn't mention here, please put that in the comments for everyone else that's watching. If you have questions about using ukuleles that I didn't address in here, put that in the comments and I will do my best to find an answer for you. I will probably, it might take another year, but I will probably do a similar video on bucket drumming because that's another big thing that's becoming more popular lately. Why do we do it? Is it just because we get the buckets for free? That's a big part of it. It's not the only part of it though. But that's where I'm going to stop this for today. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you got something out of this video and maybe you will see me again. Thank you. Goodbye.